Mike, let's talk about a recent CIO survey, our State of the CIO survey, which had a data point that frankly surprised me. CIOs were asked to self-describe how IT is perceived at their company. 750 men and women. 80% of them said IT, they described it in a passive kind of way. Either it's a cost cutter, or it's a service provider, or it's a peer. And only 9%, less than 10, 1 out of 10, said IT is perceived as a business game changer. What's your take on that?
I think it's probably accurate. In organizations I've seen, I think that's generally true. I think most organizations spend most of their people's times just keeping the lights on. And the projects that they take on tend to be defocused. They tend to take on, dozens or hundreds of low-value projects instead of taking on the 1 or 2 things that could really transform a business. And I think they do it to themselves, frankly. They allow themselves to be put into a role and to act in the way that that role would behave instead of saying, wait a minute, we know the business as well as anyone. We see how it all works. We're uniquely positioned to do that. And we can drive the next radical innovations that our business could undertake. But instead of that, they fit into the role that either they've been given or they've carved out to themselves, and I think that's a huge mistake.
You keep mentioning, you mentioned the Keep the Lights On. My favorite radio station west of the Mississippi is KTLO, Keep the Lights On. How do IT execs balance that in terms of they have to keep the lights on with being innovative and driving the top line? Is that a difficult balancing act? Yeah,
it is, and it takes a deliberate and sustained sort of strategic path to get there. So I'll give you some examples. Most IT organizations, about 70% of their people are working on maintenance, keeping the lights on. As long as that's true, the return on investment for a CEO is about 30 cents on the dollar for the labor that they're paying for IT. Not a good investment. And so what they need to do is take work out of the system. Instead of having 5 or 6 different defect tracking systems, have one. Instead of having 4 or 5 development methodologies, have one. All of those things make you efficient and they allow you to take work out of that maintenance part of the pool. Once you do that, you free up those individuals to go do true innovation on behalf of the company. And you know what? Everyone likes it. It's a win-win. The developers like it because they'd rather be doing development than maintenance. The business partners like it because they're getting something for their money in IT, right? Everyone wins when you can do that.
Why do you think it's taking such a long time for IT leaders to get this business game changer message? I mean, it seems like we've been talking about this for decades.
It's really hard to break the cycle. If you think about it, today I have to make sure all the systems run. So how do I re-engineer the airplane while it's in the air is the kind of a problem you're talking about. I've got to keep the lights on, and yet somehow I've got to free up people to go start this cycle. And what we found is that there's low-hanging fruit. In other words, there are certain things you could go do literally tomorrow that wouldn't negatively impact the business. Free up a few people. Use them to retire the next thing or simplify the next part. Free up some more people. It's a virtuous cycle that builds on itself. But it's very, very hard. It's got to be driven top down. And frankly, IT organizations generally believe that if they confront, is the word a lot of people would use, their business partners, they're going to get negative reactions. And in my experience, that's true initially. But when you show them the full vision and you start to get them some wins from this process, all of that goes away.
You've been talking about it in this interview in many different ways, but I just wanted to focus in on it at the end here. You're in a very, very competitive marketplace.
We are.
How do you, as CIO at AMD, how are you involved in making the company even more competitive? Maybe from a strategic sense, more so than from a technology one.
Yeah, the CIO role varies by company. For AMD, it's all about designing the next generation of system on a chip or processor, right? And so for me, I spend a lot of my time trying to make engineering more productive. So we've built one of the world's largest private clouds. More recently, what we're helping them do is to consolidate all of their data. Big data is a topic for CIOs today, and we're actually re-architecting our data now to incorporate Hadoop for unstructured data, followed by a parallel data warehouse for massive throughput so that we can get a handle on defects, frankly, during the design process when they're the easiest to fix.
One last question. How much time do you spend with customers?
Actually, quite a bit. My CEO is very progressive, and he's asked me to play a couple of roles in addition to keeping the lights on in the data centers. One of those is to be the voice of the customer. I'm actually one of the larger customers for AMD. I run lots of our products in our data centers, and I'm in a good position to talk to other CIOs about how that works. They don't really want to hear from marketing, frankly, about the products. They want to know how it really runs in a data center, someone who has the same problems they do. And so I've been doing quite a bit of that.
I think we'll end it there. Mike Wolfe, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for AMD. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Gary.